Today, we are joined by Stephen Bear and Scott Provence from Ingenuity, a team of behavioral experts who help organizations build stronger connections with their employees and customers. Stephen is the co-founder and managing partner of Ingenuity. Before that, he co-founded the game agency, later acquired by ELB Learning. With 3 decades focused on human connection and motivation, he's also the author of 2 children's books and the upcoming business title, Stickology, How to Build a Brand That Employees and Customers Stick With. And Scott is an award-winning designer of AI software and training curricula, specializing in the intersection of learning, business strategy, and AI. A former learning and development leader at Google Health, he now helps companies of all sizes understand and apply AI to build more agile and engaged teams. Thank you both for joining us today, Stephen and Scott.
Well, thanks for having us. We're excited.
Glad to be here.
Well, as you can probably tell from our pictures, I'm the silly one and Scott's the smart one. So I'll lean into the silliness, and then Scott will make us all hopefully a little bit smarter. We are talking about how AI can restore human connection, but what does that mean? Ultimately, we obviously are many people today work in a complex world and in complex organizations. And one of the things that we're focused on is how do we bring back genuine human connection into those environments. So we're going to look at what some of the leading companies are doing on this front. We're going to talk about how AI helps with this without losing the people in the process, because at the end of the day, the best companies really start with people and end with people. We're going to talk about how you can break complex tasks into automated steps. We're going to talk about the human ingenuity and where it's most essential. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about how do you reclaim those micro moments, those human connections that are essential for building loyalty and fostering innovation and creating cultures that people want to be in and where people feel valued. So it's a meaty topic or set of topics, but we're really excited to dig in. Before we do that, I wanted to just take a moment and kind of engage you guys to participate in the conversation, which I hope you'll do throughout the entire webinar. But I want to begin with 3 poll questions. So Sarah, do you want to queue up the first one? I guess I'll throw it here. The question is, and we'll ask you guys to answer this, what is your level of familiarity with AI? So we have it on a scale 1 to 5. What's AI? You've dabbled in it maybe a little bit. You're getting the hang of it. You're pretty comfortable with it, or you're a certified prompt whisperer. If maybe we can just take 30 seconds or so to answer that, so we have a level set of where people stand.
Great, yeah. So we have the poll launched here. Results are streaming in. We'll give you another 20 seconds to get those results in before we show them up on the screen here for you. Okay, great. I'm going to get these results up here. There you are. Do you see those on your side?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I can't see those. So Scott, will you walk me through them?
So we got about 12% in the what's AI category, and you're in the right spot. I feel like I go back into that stage every week. So you're in good company. 29-30%. I've dabbled. 41% right in the middle there. So that's kind of the big part of our bell curve, getting the hang of it. And then similar to our kind of right at the start there, we've got about 18%. That's pretty comfortable. We have 0 certified prompt whisperer AI experts, which is, again, totally fine. I feel like anytime I even get close to that myself, something new launches and I swing back down to what's AI. So I think we got a good range here.
And I think that one of the things that Scott said is really important is that AI is moving at such a rapid pace that there's opportunity for all of us to be continuously learning. And so we really will, I think that bell curve actually works quite well for this webinar, because we're going to talk a little bit about certainly where you can use things most effectively, the types of tools that you can or approaches you can use for AI. And I think that will hit this audience just about right. Hopefully we will have nailed that. But if you want more or want less, let us know in here, and certainly let us know afterwards. We're happy to do follow-up. Okay, poll number 2. What's your organization's largest priority when it comes to AI? Upskilling and empowering employees, integrating AI into your core workflows, building ethical and transparent AI practices, driving innovation and competitive advantage, or strengthening data foundations. They're all really important, but I'd be really curious to hear what you put as your top one.
Great. And again, we have this poll launched here, so we'll give you about 20 more seconds or so to submit your answer before we share those results up on the screen here.
It's interesting to see these coming in.
Let's see. All right, let's get these results up now. Oh,
all right.
Share those again. Share that again. There we are.
Yeah, so we got a pretty good split. So about almost 40% is upskilling and empowering employees. Another 40% is driving innovation and competitive advantage, and then 20% is integrating AI into core workflows. Maybe slightly lower priority, because again, we're talking about this whole list of priorities. So maybe lower on the list is, what are the ethical and transparent practices? I haven't implemented them yet, so that kind of makes sense of we got to implement, figure out what we want to do, then let's figure out how we kind of build these ethical and transparency guardrails around what we're doing. And we did have one vote for strengthening data foundation. So interesting, great nuanced deep dive into an area of what is the data that I'm putting into the system, and how do I make sure that is as robust and clean and labeled as I can make it to drive good results.
That's great. That's great. Okay, well, good. Once again, I think this is going to align quite well with what we're going to be discussing today. So that's terrific. This last poll I want to do is I'm going to ask that you just write into the chat here. What if you had to design a sentence to describe this image? What would that sentence be? And I promise there's a reason I'm doing this. We'll come back to that in a little bit. But maybe we can put a few answers in here so we have a sense of what people are thinking.
Yeah, so take a second here and type that into the questions box once you have your answer.
I knew Sarah was going to tell me that I did that wrong. Darn it. Okay.
I didn't tell you.
I want to see if some questions come in. So the little chat with the question mark, and then type it in the box there. I will read out some of these as they come in, and give people maybe 30 seconds to respond to this.
Stunning art. Stunning art.
Right. Stunning art. Yeah. Oh, we got some great ones coming. Okay, so marriage, kids, growing in life. Interesting. Something about people. Good. You don't have to go jump in a lake. You can read about it instead and still be happy. Oh, that's my favorite answer so far. Great one from, let me shout out to Curtis. That's very cool. All right, yeah. I think those are going to be our three top winners right there.
Okay, we'll come back to this. There's a reason I wanted you to respond to that, and you'll see the relevance a little bit later in this webinar. But so let's put a pin on that for right now. So I want to start off with just talking about people and people's happiness and what we're seeing in the workforce today. According to Gallup poll, 59% of employees worldwide are quiet quitting. And so what does that mean? That basically means that they're putting in no more effort than absolutely necessary and kind of calling it in and not really wanting to be there. And of course, this is a state of mind that no employee wants to be in, and certainly no company wants to have their employees in. So I wanted to level set because that's where we stand right now, and that's a pretty just a tremendous number when you look at the marketplace. So the natural question that one might ask is, well, why is this even happening? And my answer is because I feel like we are all like hamsters just running on our treadmills here, 24/7 and really inundated by information and just trying to keep up, and that's no way to live, right? And the irony is that you would think that in today's day and age, where technology is at the at the ready, whether it be through email or video conferences or collaboration tools or communication tools or whatnot, that we would be incredibly connected and would feel like we're way more efficient and way more part of a community. And what we're seeing is the actually opposite, right? We're seeing that our employees and hopefully no organization really has 3 employees who are sitting next to each other looking just like this. But our employees are more disconnected than ever before, right? There's just, and I think that this is a major issue we're seeing, not just, unfortunately, not just in the office, but in homes too, right? We're just seeing that technology, when used potentially the wrong way, is not bringing us together. And don't get me wrong, because obviously technology enables some amazing things, right? It allows us to connect from anywhere in the world. It allows us to collaborate together real time at any point. It allows us to upskill our employees on a level and in ways that certainly we could have only dreamed about 15, 20, 30 years ago. And it allows us to analyze how we're, what our people know, how they're performing, where their knowledge gaps, so on and so forth. But it's also leaving us kind of feeling drained, kind of feeling like work is meaningless, and like we're searching for a lot more, and that's not what any company wants our people to feel. So I'll ask a second question, which is, if being connected at work is important, which I think we could probably all agree it is, because when there's human connection, things are magical. Why haven't we cracked the technology code on how to accomplish this, right? Maybe technology is not the right solution. I think it is. And what we're seeing is that there are actually lots of companies out there who have figured out how to connect with their people, utilize technology, and move their companies forward in a really tremendous way. And so, you don't have to look much further than this list, which is a Great Place to Work list from Fortune, or plenty others like it, and you see some common themes when these organizations are really focused on culture, community, and people. One, you're seeing that they have 1/3 the level of turnover that any of their competitors do, right? So that's fantastic, right? What does that accomplish? Obviously, it saves us money because no one wants to be recruiting or onboarding, and obviously you don't want all your institutional knowledge to walk out the door. So that's tremendous in its own right. The second thing we're seeing is that probably because of longevity and probably because of the loyalty and interest that the employees at those organizations have, we're seeing 8.5 times the amount of revenue per employee over their competitors. So tremendous, right? Once again, we're focusing on our people and we're seeing the results. Not just that people are staying, but people are actually having a greater impact on the organization. And then when we look at the market, we're seeing that these companies have a 3.5 times the performance against the S&P. So we're saving money, we're keeping people there longer, we are having people perform better, and we're having the companies performing better. So really all stakeholders, whether employees, companies, investors, everyone's happy. Now don't get me wrong, these companies are spending a lot of time and focus on technology, but they're human first and they're tech forward, right? And I think that combination is really, really critical. I want to give you a few examples, and I wanted to start with Starbucks because that's how I start my morning every day. I am not probably. I am one of those people who spends way too much money on Starbucks every day, every year, and this gentleman on the bottom right, Mark Jesime, he is the manager at my local Starbucks. I see him at 6:30 a.m. every morning. He knows what drink I'm going to have. He also happens to know my 3 kids' names. He also happens to know that my youngest loves to do improv and always asks about that, when he can see the latest show that he's doing and whatnot. He also comments on my glasses. We just have a connection. But the thing that's tremendous about Mark is he doesn't just have a connection with me. He has a connection with all of the customers who come in, and he doesn't just know stuff about me or about them. We know stuff about him too. We know that he is a photographer, and we know that he is constantly around in our town, really capturing lots of great shots and becoming part of the community. And so he aligns very much with what their new CEO's mantra is making customers feel seen and supported and like they matter, right? And so, things are a little backwards, but here he is as a photographer. So I like that, because ultimately, when I think about Starbucks, it's not just about the fact that I spend too much on coffee. It's about, and it's not just about the fact that they're a giant organization. It's about the fact that I can connect with the local people in my local Starbucks. And so you're like, okay, I'm here to talk about AI. So why are we talking about Mark, Jesime? Well, I'll tell you. Mark, as the manager there, really is enabled to spend that time with me as a customer, and really honestly the same thing with his employees, because AI is giving him the tools to do things like train new hires a little bit more simply, or automate their inventory count, so he's not spending time doing that, or improving their order accuracy. And so they have all sorts of tools in place that are all AI specific, and the results are staggering, right? We're seeing that the training time at Starbucks has gone down from 30 to 12 hours as a result of using those tools. Their inventories is counted 8 times more regularly, and therefore there's the accuracy is much higher. Their speaking of accuracy, their improved accuracy when it comes to orders has gone from 94%, which I would argue is actually quite good to begin with, up to 99%, and their customer wait time has gone down to 18 seconds. And so I wanted to kind of give this example and a few more to kind of show you how when you put the right tools in place behind the scenes, it allows the people right in the front to really connect with each other and connect with your customer. Let's talk about a few other examples. While we're on food, let's go over to Hershey's. Hershey's Entertainment and Resorts, their focus is on improving overall guest experiences with convenience and consistency. Here I am at Hershey's. I went down there recently to in Pennsylvania to stay at their lodge and to go to their theme park. And what I experienced when I went down there was an app that I was given access to that was really connected to everything I did there, right? Whether it was at the resort, whether it was the meals I was having, both, by the way, in the restaurant or in room service or at the theme park, everything was connected, and it was quite great. The AI bot allowed me to was able to identify me by my caller ID. It addressed me immediately by name and in the form of calls or text. It scheduled my activities. It gave me different notifications, and it saved its staff lots of time and gave them lots of information about me so that when they talked to me, there was greater human connection. Not terribly surprising, because Hershey's has had for 45 consecutive years, they've been the winner of the AAA 4 Diamond Award. And so I think, like many companies, they're trying to think about, in this new day and age of technology, or AI in this case, how do they stay focused on delivering amazing human connection and human experiences? 2 more examples. I want to talk about T-Mobile, and I want to talk specifically about their customer service team. They're using AI to analyze the data that they're getting on customers, and they're allowing, basically as a co-pilot, allowing them to make their experts, which are their customer service people, that much more familiar with the situation, and that much more enabled to apply different empathy and solve problems in a genuine way and an informed way. And this is a very simple, straightforward approach, but it's really pushed the customer service much further ahead, and customers much more satisfied as a result. The last example I want to give is Ochsner Health Network. And I like this one because ultimately this serves several stakeholders, kind of going back to those charts I was showing. They're using AI to make their physicians happier, their patients healthier. Specifically, this happens to be in their anesthesiology department. They're optimizing the scheduling process, and they're helping procedural safety. So what does that even look like? Okay. Historically, it's taken their team 75 hours a week to schedule upcoming procedures for their anesthesiologists. Well, using AI, it's obviously clearly still complex, but they were able to knock that down to 14 hours as a result. They were able to eliminate on a monthly basis about 1,100 procedure handoffs. I don't know about you, but when I think about me, if I'm in surgery, the last thing I want is one anesthesiologist clocking out, another one clocking in. I want whoever that person, he or she, to be there and to be doing their best because they're focused on me, and timing is not a distraction for them. As a result of these reduced handoffs, they've been able to, on a monthly basis, prevent 70 plus harmful events. Okay, that's amazing. And probably most importantly, they're seeing that there's an increased physician satisfaction because it's moving a lot smoother. And they've seen that in a 6-month period, they've gone from a 3.3 up to a 4.2 in physician satisfaction. So you have healthier patients, happier physicians, better outcomes. That's what you want. And this is by literally just looking at a problem set and saying, how can we solve it with AI? What I've seen across these 4 examples is 3 big lessons, right? One is that in all cases, these organizations are leading with people. They're thinking about, how do I make my employees happier? How do I make my customers happy? They're then taking technology and amplifying the people they have in their 4 walls as opposed to replacing them. And then they're trying to say, how do we continue to stay focused on humans at scale? Employees, customers, all really critical. Okay, let's just take a few minutes. We're going to move over to Scott, but I want to just ask that if there's any particular thoughts or questions based on the stuff that we put here, let's lean in and we can address those now, and as we move over to Scott.
Yeah, there's a great question, and yeah, others, if they've got questions, drop them in the chat now. Stephen, there's a great question from Sean, which I know we'll get to in this second half as we start to really break down some of these concepts. But Sean pointing out, how challenging it can be when there are still gatekeepers and bureaucracy in the system. That how do we supercharge a process or keep the human focus or scalability of initiatives when there might be that kind of demotivating multi-stepped process that folks have to go to, whether that's in public or private sectors. I know that within again, a lot of those public sectors, it can feel when I work with those clients like a lot of those challenges happening, which I'm sure you've run across too.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, you look at bureaucracy from two fronts, right? You look at one, in an organization, can you get buy-in from senior levels to make sure that things are being done? And if you can't, right, one of the things that we subscribe to is really looking at doing small tests, small solutions. Certainly, the best thing you can do if that's the case is to show great wins, even if they're small wins, because with enough of those, you'll get the attention of people who hopefully will get out of the way and allow you to implement on a larger scale.
Yeah. Great point. Well, cool. Well, I will take over the screen again. Yeah, if there are other questions, drop them in the question tab there. Actually, I want to encourage everyone to warm up their fingers, and if you're able to, I know some are in maybe spots where they can't access a keyboard, but I want to see if you're able to type in even just one word into our question window. This is my attempt. Like Stephen knows this about me. I am pretty regimented and methodical and mathematical. This is my attempt to be fun, but I'm going to ruin it by linking it to a study from Berkeley in a second. So to warm up our brains a little bit here at the halfway point, if you're able to type in the window here, the question and answer window, one word that comes to mind for the following animal I'm about to show you. So again, your goal, I'm going to show you an animal. I want you to think of one word that embodies the essence of this animal, that describes this animal, whatever word comes to your mind. So if you've got the little icon here, go to your question tab and get ready to type in an answer to what you see on the screen. All right, ready? Here's our animal. All right, look at this beautiful specimen here. So type in the question, the one word that comes to mind here. I'm gonna before I read any of them out, I'm gonna let some folks come in here. This is so cool. As you're typing this in, I want you also to think, what is the likelihood that someone else is going to write the same word as mine? And again, I'm going to, lower our excitement level by linking this to a really intensive research study in a second here. Okay, getting great results here. So I'm going to read out a few of them. Adorable, cold, monogamous, cute, waddler, resilient, a couple of cutes. We have percentages. Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, mates for life. Okay. Fierce. If I haven't mentioned the fierce, that's one of my favorites. So cool. So a range of words. A couple of overlaps. I think we had a couple of cutes and a couple of waddles, which is great. But also some really unique ones. So fierce, really cool, adorable. Yeah, maybe some people disagree, but maybe they don't. The reason that I'm even starting, you might wonder, like, why have a question about penguins in a talk with AI? Here comes the nerdy part. There was actually a study done at UC Berkeley that was really, it was looking at common words. It was looking at common names, like politicians in the US. It was looking at common nouns. It was looking at animals. And they found that even with very common, well-known names, animals, nouns, there were still 10 to 30 quantifiably different concept variants for each of these very common words. And the likelihood that there would be an overlap, that two people selected out of their study group at random would share the same concept, people thought it was going to be high. People were mostly guessing 2/3 of the folks are going to agree with this one word. Everyone's going to know that penguins are smart. It's actually about 12%. And this is a kind of a snapshot of one of their images from the study, and I've linked it down at the bottom there. But you can see here we've got the penguin word. They tested a bunch of words. We have some areas where everyone's in agreement that penguins are not dangerous or scary or gigantic. Some kind of very high agreement, but low fidelity. We have high agreement that everyone thought that penguins were, or a lot of people thought penguins were interesting or flightless or cute. You could probably see some of your words in there. What really interests me, though, is this big middle ground area where there was low agreement in what we thought penguins were. And yet this was where a lot of the people's descriptors were kind of consolidating here. So we think that we're very similar. We think that we often share kind of the same worldview, when in reality, it's much less likely. I also thought it was really interesting. Funny that I use that word. The least kind of engaging word to me was the one everyone agreed on most, which was interesting. And it's sometimes like the least interesting word that I can think of. Where a lot of my attention goes is, who on earth thought penguins were sharp? Like that is never a word I would have thought. Or bright, or was that like shiny bright, or like smart bright? Loud, noisy, okay, maybe, but fluffy, squishy, slimy. These are really interesting words, and it makes me, the reason that we're talking about this here is it makes me want to kind of get into that human connection. I want to meet the person who thinks penguins are tenacious. That sounds like a really interesting person to get to know. How does this link to AI? When we think about large language model technology, so the GPTs, the Geminis, the Claudes, everything that you're seeing kind of in the headlines today, this type of technology, let's first recognize it is just one type of AI technology. And a lot of the talks that I do is getting in deep into the weeds on how is this different from supervised learning or reinforcement learning. Large language model technology is specifically designed to generate human-like text based on the most likely patterns and relationships that it learns from its training data. So as you can probably guess here, this study and kind of understanding what are the most common words that people think of, this is almost a mirror of how LLM technology is designed. And it's probably no surprise to you that when I ask GPT, and I just confirmed this yesterday, so I got a new list, and I said, what are the ways that you would describe a penguin? Almost all of these words are showing up in the most likely category. Again, this should not be totally surprising to us, but what I wanted to highlight is all of these words that we're not paying attention to, and the risk that we run if we lean too heavily into AI technology to come up with our worldviews and tell us what our descriptors should be, is we're missing out on all of the sharp, slimy, strange words that can really drive a project or a human connection forward. I put a couple of these in, or one of these in dashes, social friendly maybe, but yeah, you can kind of see where a lot of these are overlapping here. So what do we do with this in a business setting? Well, I want to take the same quote from that Berkeley study, that probability two people selected at random will share the same concept of penguins at about 12%. And I want us to think about how that might apply to our workflow environments. I can't see you all on screens, but I would guess if I asked for a show of hands if people have run across this cartoon before. It's been around for probably a couple of decades at this point, but it's kind of satirizing the workflow of whether this is software development or product lifecycle or anything that you're working with. This probably has some sort of element of truth for you. The customer will explain it one way, and then the project leader will maybe interpret that in a slightly different way. The engineer will have maybe a different type of build for that, which will then be also programmed in a slightly different way. Meanwhile, sales is selling an entirely different concept, probably not so much documentation happening, probably very different from what is actually installed versus what is built versus the help desk support. And all of that stuff is really showing us this slippage that can happen when we have different core concepts or worldviews coming up. So first question to kind of ask yourself when you think about using this type of technology to maybe gloss over some of the gaps that can happen is how is that potentially amplifying these missed connections? And what is the probability that two people in your workflow will share the same concept, the core concept of a project or a product? Is it 12%? Is it less than that? This is something for us to really be thinking about and querying seriously. We don't have time to dive into all of the specific details. This is something that our agency does a lot. Is we're going to focus on one panel. We're going to look just at leadership communications or operational efficiencies. So we dive deep into each one of these specific panels, sales enablement and kickoffs. How do we do that in a really targeted way? It's a lot of our daily work. We don't have obviously time to get into that in today's condensed session. So I want to give you just a really brief look, and I want to just highlight the first starting panel and the ending panel here. So I think this is kind of interesting because this is both happening kind of on the customer side of things. And keep in mind that this customer could be an internal customer as well as an external customer. Maybe you're working as an HR or a learning and development function. That is still an internal customer. They have explained some sort of issue to you. And what I love is, I think is so important about this depiction is what they explain to you might be different from what they actually need. And so even within the customer's own concept, how they express that need might have some sort of encoding issue or this lost in translation effect. There's a really basic framework, but one that I haven't seen too much in business. I first ran across it in my work in behavioral health and healthcare training environments. There was a psychologist mid-20th century named Thomas Gordon, a Rogerian. He worked a lot with Carl Rogers, and he had this great communication model to really exemplify and show how messages can degrade through various states of encoding and decoding. Think about the tree swing kind of getting missed in each one of these panels. The way that Gordon described this is he says, okay, we're going to have a client, and in his world it was someone coming in for therapy or evaluation, but we can think about the same way as a customer. So we have something that is existing in the customer's head, and that's where that starts. But the first thing that needs to happen is they need to take that and force that through the words that they're saying. So this is kind of this first step where potentially loss can happen. Something can get encoded in maybe a clunky word, or Scott's only giving me one word to describe a penguin. I got to take this whole big concept that I have in my brain and squish it down into adorable. So then I have to take that word, that kind of inaccurate, clunky transmission, and then say that out loud to someone who then has to hear it. And there's also a chance for loss to happen just in the hearing. Maybe I mistype or missay something. Maybe someone can't quite understand me. Maybe someone else's conception of a word is defined slightly differently in their lexicon. And finally, you have to take those words that hopefully they heard as clearly as possible and then interpret them back up into their own brains. This might seem like a very basic system, but we are going to dive into it just in a little bit more to really understand how important and foundational it is to really all of the business level communications that we do, and how introducing technology like AI can really compound this problem. I don't think I've got any questions right now, but if you do have questions on this, I know I'm going to start to kind of ramp up a bit in terms of the applications of this, and so do drop in questions if you've got them. Hopefully the step-by-step is working okay, and we're going to start to connect it back to some of Stephen's use cases in a second. So this idea of telephone, this game of kind of compounding loss, is really applicable in business environments, especially if you are working in large organizations, cross-functional organizations. Each one of these handoffs involves more encoding and decoding layers. So again, we have what the customer thinks and what they say, that being a first potential loss before it even gets to our organization or our individual vertical. You know, our boss is going to hear words and then think those words mean something different, and then pass on those words to a different VP who's going to then outsource that to a bunch of different smaller organizations. Think about what happens now in this game of telephone when we introduce technology. And again, you know, the core title of our talk, what happens not only to the workflow itself, but what happens to the humans. AI will make this transformation faster. There's no doubt about it. AI can summarize my meeting and have that instantly before I can even write down or summarize, recap my one page of handwritten notes. But that encoding or decoding process not only gets more opaque, it also gets flattened. Contextual intent goes from something very nuanced to something very average. So as we're introducing AI into this system, we get probabilistic responses, but that's really this regression to the mean. The illusion of clarity, just because my GPT agent has summarized it for me, is replacing actual nuance and understanding. And I would argue this is where we kind of get to that quiet quitting employee, someone who is very much picking up on the fact that I have lost a million different nuances through all of these different steps. It gets back to Sean's question about this kind of demotivating force that can happen as bureaucracy gets all the way through. And yes, I'm so glad. Actually, I think this was the same Sean even who called out the point of active listening. This is exactly the connection point we're going to make. So that is you're reading from the same notes here. That's perfect. I hope that in looking at this isn't too triggering for folks, but I do hope that it also feels a little familiar as we start to see this progression of coding and decoding through different brains, and specifically focusing on the compounding loss that can happen. Remember, this is loss that gets multiplied as it goes through each one of these steps. So what do we do with this now? I hope this is not too depressing to look at, but I do want to kind of bring us back around to what can we do? To Sean's point, and if others have other things that they've used, drop them in the chat. You know, we're all going to be experts here in this sense. But when it comes to how do we restore human connection, that missing step is how do we check back in upstream? How do we see what encoding and decoding happened before the input reached my desk? So just as a reminder, this comes from a upstream person's client, you know, boss, whoever that is. They've got a worldview. They have to translate that into some sort of clunky text that we all are trying to use. They have to communicate that to us via, you know, meeting, phone call, whatever that is. We've got to put that through our own lexicon and then get that back into our brain of what we think that means. What's missing here, and how we can take that first step to restore human connection, is to not just check our GPTs and make sure that, you know, I got the meeting notes transcribed correctly, but actually leap all the way back in and say, is what you meant by this one initiative, you know, the same thing that I think it means? The concept of active listening, that ability to not just listen, but to check in, to summarize, to say, I think what you're saying is this. Can you confirm if that's right or not? That is more than just a nice to have. That's essential when it comes to restoring human connection. And this is really what Gordon's model was designed to do. It was to make that final fourth arc back to the original meaning and say, what are the steps that you're taking to restore and confirm that connection? I want to pause on that because I really want you to ask yourself that. I want you to ask yourself, what are the steps that we are doing to check our upstream connections? Sometimes this is not even done with a GPT agent. Sometimes this is just, I trust whatever it did, and I'm going to assume that if a large language model of Gemini or GPT told me those were in the notes, that's probably true. That's an important check to do too, not even close to as important as checking in with our human counterparts. So again, question to ask yourself. I'm going to pause just to give us a second to reflect. Eager to hear if others have thoughts on this, put them in the questions. But where are you creating opportunities to check in? And not only that, but where are you creating opportunities to maybe marvel at the different worldviews of those around you? This is what I thought of penguins were. Like, I had no idea that was the first word that came to your mind. This is totally different. And now we have a chance to connect on that. I'm going to bring this back to artificial intelligence in a second here, but again, the kind of core thesis that Steve and I are coming to you with is to not let this get swept under the rug amidst all of the technology capabilities. I will talk a little bit about the capabilities of technology now because I definitely think this is an and, but I wanted to start with this concept because it's very important for us to acknowledge the humans driving this underneath. There's a great quote from as we get back into kind of the AI tech, great book that came out recently by Emily Bender and Alex Hanna. They really are calling attention to this fact that when we have large language model technology like we do today, this technology is giving us the kind of text and response that a real person might have said. It is so convincing. It is way far past this like Turing test of, can a computer act like a human? What's happening though is through hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, we have naturally evolved to assume that there is a mind behind this text. That, again, going back to Gordon's model, that if some word gets, processed through to me via speech or text or email, whatever that is, if I read text that sounds human, I'm going to assume that there is a human mind and intention behind that text. It is so essential for us to recognize that there is no mind in a large language model's technology. There is no core worldview that is driving this. In fact, you could even make the argument, and we do in some of our other deep dives, that the regression to the mean and that kind of average mind, that worldview that it is projecting back to us, has some big biases baked in, and there are some important ethical questions that we want to ask ourselves, even to that kind of regression to the mean. But the most important thing to recognize is that there is no mind here. Does that mean that we need to throw out all of technology? No, absolutely not. And this is where I want to bring back a couple of Stephen's examples of how some of these best places to work are really leaning into technology while keeping Gordon's framework and this idea of multi-staged, complex workflow processing and communications in mind. So back to Ochsner Health, if you remember their example about clinician scheduling, this whole point of how do I take all of these messy clinician schedules over multiple locations and time zones and all different events that are going on, recognize how their approach to using a specific type of artificial intelligence was actually aimed at reducing the number of total handoffs. This is one of the first questions you can ask, and I'll show you in a second how we do this with some deep dives in our own consulting work. But what are the number of steps that we're working with in our workflow, and can technology actually help us reduce those handoffs? So Ochsner actually deployed a specific type of AI, not even large language model technology, but combinatorial optimization, a specific type of algorithm that I could nerd out about for a different hour, but recognize how important that is to minimize the opportunities for semantic drift. My check-in now becomes, did that specific algorithm match my schedule, not did these three other people that I'm trying to coordinate schedules with understand my meaning when I said that I'm free. This is a very deterministic system, and the technology is specifically matched to the problem in need of solving here. Does that mean that we should throw out all of GPT and large language model approaches? No. Again, recognize that the workplaces that are really rising to the top here recognize that this type of technology, this conversational technology, still can be used with the help of, not even with help of, in service to human experts to check back in on human-to-human conversations. So again, T-Mobile using AI to surface those potential issues and sentiments that people might be having, but trusting their human experts to then confirm or clarify with customers. So if someone is saying something, a large language model can highlight a word and say, on an average scale, probabilistically, that word often represents a negative sentiment or a positive sentiment or a flag of something to check back in on. Does that mean that we should always trust the LLM? No, but this is your chance to, again, connect your worldview to theirs and say, hey, when you said that word, sometimes that makes me think of X, Y, and Z. What I think I'm hearing is this. Getting back to Sean's question about active listening, this is where, yeah, theory of mind, great point from Curtis here too. This is kind of that theory of mind that only we can be in charge of, and we are specifically not trusting that large language model to have some brain to solve this problem for us. I love the questions and the comments that are coming in here. Yeah, so I'll pause here in a second to check in on these, but I love that folks are really connecting with some of these things. All right, so with those questions in mind, you again can start to see these different types of AI that are at play here, and how the companies that are really exceeding at restoring that human connection are deploying AI in very targeted ways, not in this broad scoping, broad brushstroke way, not running far away from it and saying we should not adopt any of this new technology, but matching the right problems to the right solutions here. So I'll pause for questions. Stephen, is there any questions that I've missed in our window here? Looks like this is so far. So
yeah, no, you've hit everything that the last thing that Sean was talking about was seeing more emotion over logic, and I think that ties directly into it, right? Is making sure that you're looking at both, right?
Yeah, and to just even to touch on that a second longer. Again, going back to our penguin study, so something as common and as understood, quote unquote, as a penguin or a pen, I will have maybe a slightly different concept of what this is for. This is a sword. This is a revolution. Whatever. This is an ink holder. These kind of core concepts, even for something as concrete as that, we're missing each other 85% of the time. Think about how much more that gets compounded if someone says, I am frustrated, or I am sad, or I am anxious. These are emotion words. Do we have any hope at saying, oh yeah, your definition of anxiety is going to be the same as mine? We're totally fine. Or trusting a large language model to define anxiety for me, or just say that, yeah, if it's a negative sentiment, just go ahead and pass it on to another team. We don't need to check on that. Very cool. Yeah, other questions come in. Yeah, drop them in. I will pause in a second here to wrap up our last 5 minutes with some open-ended questions, and Steve and I can hang out and chat, and we'll make sure you guys have our emails to follow up. But I did want to go back to that one of those first polls that Stephen was mentioning here, because this is these were a couple of the key areas that people are really working on with AI right now. Big priorities: how do we upskill and empower employees? How do we integrate AI into core workflows? These are a lot of the types of requests that we're getting right now, and this is what leads to some of our deeper dives and deeper programming works, or Scott talking your ear off for an extra hour on the different types of AI. Let's understand, let's really unpack what Oshner did in its combinatorial optimization algorithms and why that's different from large language model technology and communication keyword prediction. Let's understand, back to that earlier question about those levels and layers of bureaucracy, and how we can really unpack workflows to understand how each of those steps gets handed off, and some of the core questions we can ask ourselves during those workflow mapping exercises to maybe reduce that friction or really unpack those key moments of meaning here. For those, I'm seeing some questions here. So yeah, for some of those earlier questions about workflow mapping, just as a really kind of brief example, to peel back the onion one layer deeper, when we get into more of our in-depth programming around workflow mapping, process mapping in the age of AI, these are the types of questions that are underneath Gordon's communication model just by one layer even. If we think about that handoff that you're getting from someone, words, texts, initiative, KPIs, OKRs, whatever you want to call them, one of the questions we first ask folks as we're starting to consult with them is that input structured or unstructured data? That's a great question for you to ask as you're starting to analyze that information coming in, whether from the client or from another peer. Are the steps that you're supposed to take with that input, are they fixed? Can you do them every time without fail, repeatably in a documentable way? Or is this a fluid, nope, I just trust my gut, and every day slightly different approach? How you answer that matters, and how you answer that really depends on the type of algorithmic AI assistance you can bring in. Fixed steps are going to be great for decision trees or combinatorial optimization algorithms like Oshner used. Slightly more fluid step, maybe with some unstructured communication. Yeah, maybe large language model technology is going to be a really valuable tool there to say, oftentimes when people say this, it can point to or can correlate with that. There are other times when we need something to be human to human, and there is no way around that. And again, I want to call our attention back to the active listening, the encoding upstream double checks that we can do to confirm that our understanding of a key concept matches someone else's understanding of a key concept. Just to drive that home one point further, again, this is the type of stuff that we'll do in a deeper dive with a workflow, is figuring out, okay, what are you doing? What are you doing with your teams? What are you doing with your HR department this week? Is this a scheduling issue like Oshner's? Do we take structured data and then move it through some fluid steps because every month is going to be different, but we really want a outcome that is a single source of truth? Okay, this workflow is very unique for the type of not only technology but communications and the people we need to involve with this. This is obviously is not deep enough to answer all of the questions, but even starting to map this out on a binary decision tree can be very different from a prototyping project where we are dealing with a lot of unstructured ideas versus labeled structured schedules. Dealing with unstructured ideas takes an entirely different approach, maybe with a different team, maybe with different technology. Those steps are probably going to stay really fluid, but instead of a single output, I might be looking at a very divergent output. I want a lot of ideas and I don't want a single answer right now. I will say that this is where prototyping, brainstorming is a great example of where large language models can be very effective. They are great at showing you some possibilities out there, so long as you keep that image in mind of our penguin study, and that it will give you some very commonly used brainstorming techniques or terms. That might be fine to get us started, but don't forget those rare, interesting, innovative words. That is where a lot of the true innovations and new product ideas will lie. And hopefully by seeing some of these studies side by side, seeing some of the ways that those algorithmic applications can be used, we're starting to open up the box a little bit and learn a bit how those technologies work. All right, I've got one more thing I want to share, but if you're thinking about some of this and how it might apply to you, I'll keep the last 5 minutes or so open for questions. I do want to end with kind of getting back to this idea of connecting our people-to-people worldviews in mind, and maybe this final question of asking yourself, and when you look at your own workflow or your team's workflow, is my goal here to condense and preserve meaning? Am I trying to be like an Oshner where I want to limit the number of steps and limit the amount of semantic drift that might happen in my workflow? Or is my goal to actually create meaning? Do I want to really highlight and point out the gaps and the differences between our different worldviews? I don't want you to leave thinking that there's only one answer there, that you always should be trying to just condense and make more efficient. I actually think, bringing us all the way back to our full title and our theme here, that calling out the differences, calling out those discrepancies can actually be a great way to restore that human connection. So not obliterating it, not using AI to gloss it over or try to always build the bridge, but to say, you totally look at something different from me, and I am so fascinated by that. Here's a really, really simple example of how we do this within Engagency occasionally. Well, these are great kind of meeting kickoffs. You're welcome to use this. There's tons of technology that is available to help you do this. But here's a quick example of where meaning is more than just the regression to the mean. I don't know if you've ever played this game where you have some person write a phrase, and then the next person in the line here has to take that phrase and draw a picture of it. You can probably see where I'm going with that last poll from Stevens. The next person in the line has to take that picture and then say, what was the phrase that would maybe summarize that picture, and the next person has to write a picture on that. This is a great game that we play within our team to really highlight and not only lean into that sense of play, but to really point out these differences in worldviews. So Scott writes, this meeting could have been an email, and Jamie then draws our now famous picture of what was jumping in a lake maybe, or what was marriage and family. But But then Joe gets that and says, I have no idea what Jamie, he only sees the picture and goes, I have no idea what Jamie could possibly mean by this. Maybe he meant writing equals. Sure. And so then Stephen gets, okay, how do I take writing equals and turn that into a picture? And then Ellen finally says, okay, maybe Stephen's concept art meant something like lawyer's feedback on your contract draft. Are we intending to condense and preserve meaning in this exercise? No, actually quite the opposite. We are trying to create meaning and curiosity and engagement and connection in this type of setting. So not something that we want to always use technology to just gloss over. How do we actually take our technology and our capabilities to amplify and understand and really draw out the differences between worldviews? Because what we argue is that's where all of the engagement and humor and confusion and frustration and friction, those are all things that we can lean into still, but curiosity and connection and learning can happen. All right, I will leave this screen up and see if we've got other questions here. Oh, I love this point from Sean. Yeah, looking at the outliers of the data. Oh my gosh, we could talk a whole hour on that too. Think about the algorithmic, come find me afterwards. I can explain to you kind of the algorithmic processes that can happen with, a scatter plot of data and a regression to the mean that draws the best fitting line through it. What about those outliers? Like that might be uncovering a brand new, never heard of idea. And what is an AI tool going to do? Treat it as an outlier, and it's going to kind of, discount some of those moonshots. Do we want to really let go of those, or do we want to lean into those? Yeah, great question. Stephen, any thoughts from you or things that I totally missed?
No, I think what I like is at the end of the day, I reflect often on the fact that AI is a phenomenal tool for efficiency and for summarization and for process improvement, but it's not the be all end all. And I think that that's exactly that, right? That there are some outliers. There's some brilliance out there that is sometimes lost when it's not based off of the loudest, but it's potentially the best, right? And so we want to make sure that we are doing those check-ins. We're using it as a directional, and then we're doing some, double checking, triple checking, and part of that is looking at what it's providing and really then talking to our humans around us to make sure we're optimizing.
Yeah, so true. It's so true, and yeah, see the great comments in there in the questions too. So keep those coming. I know that we're just coming up at time here, and I want to give Sarah the last minute to round us out. But feel free to reach out to Stephen and me as both either any of all of us. As you can tell, we really like talking about this. I'm always happy to chat afterwards, just informally. Happy to answer questions, or again, we're giving you like little snapshots or peeks into some of these deep dives. I'm happy to go into more detail if any of these sound interesting. But yeah, we'll stick around for a little bit longer for any other questions. But yeah, Sarah, want to finish us up here?
Well, thank you so much, Stephen and Scott. Your passion really does bleed through the screen here with this content that you shared. So we all appreciate you sharing some great information with us with this hour that we had with you guys today. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And thank you all for joining today's webinar. Before we wrap up, make sure you check out the HRDQU corporate membership. You'll be receiving information via email after we sign off today. Your entire team can access our full library of on-demand learning content. Corporate plans offer affordable tiered pricing that grows with you. So whether you're learning with a small group or your entire company, also don't forget to tune into our podcast, HRDQU in Review. That's where we continue the conversation. I would love to have you join me over there. It's a fun time. And thank you all for participating in today's webinar. Happy training, everyone.
Thanks so much. Good seeing everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
We'll talk to you soon. Yeah, take care.